Welcome to another episode of Tan's Two Cents Podcast. Today's episode is titled Blueprint for Success: Evolving Roles, Leadership Responsibilities, and Strategic Planning in GovCon. We will explore the strategic need for redefining roles in the business development lifecycle and responsibilities of C-suite leaders, and the importance of upfront capture-based blueprint for winning GovCon space. I'm your host, Ton Wilson, and today with us is Peter Lierni, a seasoned expert in business development and the author of several thought-provoking articles, which we'll talk about in this episode. Peter, thanks for joining us here today, and please say hello to our listeners, the intellectuals, and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello, intellectuals, and Tom, thank you for allowing me to be part of your wonderful podcast. My name is Peter Lierni. I'm the founder of Solutioneering, and really shortly, Solutioneering helps companies do the upfront thinking in advance of the riding to win competitive pursuits. It's not that individuals doing competitive pursuits don't think. It's just that we have a way that we bring them together collaboratively to facilitate that thinking. We use a framework that we developed called a solution engineering framework, and we use its automation as a software, which we call the solution engineering tool, or SET for short.
No, that's great. And I do believe that sometimes people don't think critically, which is kind of, the society that we're in right now. Everybody wants to hit the easy button and everything like that. So I'm really excited about this conversation we're going to have here today, where we're going to kind of dive really deep into some strategies for critical thinking and why that's kind of important. So, Peter, I've noticed from your background that you've held a couple of pivotal roles within different businesses and companies in the GovCon space, and that you're really passionate about transforming how teams approach competitive wins. And at Intellect, we work on competitive bids all the time. So, what's been the most rewarding part of helping companies kind of shift their approach to business development and proposal management?
Well, I was mentored many years ago by some really great people. And what was drilled into me in the very beginning is that we are in a thinking person's business. So when you think about, I always start off with the comment, we're all citizens of this country if you're in government contracting. And the government doesn't create anything, doesn't make anything. It comes to industry to help it close gaps it has. And really, the brain trust of the country is in the contracting workforce. So we not only have to bring the capabilities to do the work, but we have to competitively win the work,
Hmm.
which means we really have to think. What I find most rewarding is that personally is that usually when I do what I do, I learn about agencies and missions and technologies I'd never learned before. I meet great people, but we're getting people to do the upfront thinking in advance of putting pen to paper, hitting a keyboard, or even these days, prompt engineering. And what we're really trying to do as contractors, should we get the award, is give the government delivery excellence, give them the most benefit realization, quantifiable benefit realization if possible, risk mitigation, and do it in a way that, in the end helps the country's security, prosperity, and overall well-being. And that's why I enjoy and I'm passionate about what I do, is helping companies do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the government entrusts the success of different programs to government contractors. And I think it's really kind of incumbent upon us to be really diligent and thoughtful in our approach to what type of services and how qualified and what the qualified people are who are providing these services. So I love that. I love that explanation, and that's going to be kind of a common theme in our discussion here today. So let's just kind of dive straight into our discussion. And our first segment is about identifying gaps, like the disconnect between capture and proposals. And being a capture person myself, I know that there's always this huge gap between the two disciplines. And so, Peter, we're going to talk about a couple of your articles. And the first article we're going to talk about is the need for a new role in the business development lifecycle that you highlight about how traditional BD roles often kind of struggle with that transition from capture to proposals. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I've spoken about it too many times before. So, can you explain your perspective on what this gap looks like in practice and why it's such a critical issue in the GovCon business?
Certainly. Well, you know that as you can appreciate, winning competitive procurements, particularly those that are complex, high dollar value, solution based, mission critical prime contracts, is a team sport, and you know it really takes positioning for those types of contracts many years in advance. You can, for the larger players, they might be trying to influence the hill, Capitol Hill. You think about the business developers and the individuals that they're bringing in to meet with the client along the time. And then to really say, hey, do we understand this opportunity and we position ourselves well enough to be competitive? And so you decide to commit the capture resources to that. Well, the first thing I will say is very often, even between business development and capture, there's a breakdown in the continuity of information, particularly context. You know, and what I've also observed, in particularly as capture start to evolve, is that at least in I say in the Northern Virginia area because that's where I live, you'll have business development meetings going on every 2 weeks, and you'll have an opportunity come up with a slide deck, and a lot of capture managers think, unfortunately, it's all about getting by another 2 weeks, right? And
Until you update that slide.
they update that slide deck. And the truth is, me, because of where I came from, I'm really not a good liar, BSer. You know, and you had to have done your homework.
Yeah.
And so if they're presenting a win strategy, there's nothing behind those slides. And I always say, how can you show in a material way that's traceable, defensible, and explainable how you got to that win strategy? Because if they cannot, then they're setting everybody else downstream up for failure, right? So I would
Yep.
say do the upfront analyses. You have to produce an artifact analyses. There has to be something behind that slide. You've seen it, Ton, and I've seen it where most often, increasingly, that's not the case. And it's also being compounded now, I believe, by the demographic shift that's occurring in the workforce, where the older ones who are more experienced are leaving, retiring, and there's never been a sufficient or adequate mentoring or training of the newer ones coming to BD and capture, right? So they're producing outputs that are more transactional, not leading towards eventually an outcome, which is competitive win. But so then you're a capture manager, and you see a lot of capture managers, and they think they know everything about the vehicle. They know really everything about an agency. They're really great at dropping names, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, and nobody has the same customer intimacy they used to have because of the nature of this hybrid work environment. And when the customer's talking to you and talking to me, generally they're saying the same stuff to be ethical. So just because I met with a customer, which is essential but not sufficient, I still don't have competitive advantage. And what you see is you see a lot of individuals doing a lot of activities, but they're
To
not
make it
doing.
look like they're busy. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. But there's not work being done. So what's the
Hmm.
work? It's the analyses. And what I find is I came out of delivery many, many, many years doing delivery. I think you came out of delivery too, right?
I came out of delivery.
Client,
Yes.
client facing. My bias is going to come out, but I always feel that even though there's no set position description for caption manager per se, but those who come out of delivery are a little bit more in tune to be more effective capture managers because they understand what it means to be customer facing, listening to the
Hmm.
customer, trying to be responsive to them. So I feel that today's capture managers, they're overwhelmed in a lot of ways because, and sadly, some of them in their company will say, "Well, how many captures can you carry?" I mean, carry. To me, I always say you should carry no more than three. The one that's 3 months or less in front of you, the one that's 6 to 12 months away, and the one's 12 months and months out. Because otherwise, you can't give attention to everything. Your attention's diverted, right? That's just my rule, my simple rule of three. So what happens is the individuals become more transactional, activity based. I got through that. I got by another 2 weeks, and they're not doing the analyses. And we'll talk more about that later on, I guess, and producing the artifacts of those analyses. And because they're not doing that, they're setting everybody up downstream up for failure. And so then when it comes between, if you look at when I did capture, I look at the proposal manager, the solution architect. Those are my customers.
Right.
If I didn't take care of those internal customers first, we weren't going to win a deal. So I dealt with some proposal managers that were really tough people, and I saw them do things to people that I wouldn't want done to me, but I understood why. And I always make a joke. It's not meant to be funny, but just to make a point. Why would anybody pick a job to be a proposal manager where it causes health issues and relational issues? And the reason is those poor people very often are picking up the junk because everybody
Yep.
upstream didn't do their job. And they're
Shit
and the
rolls
end
downhill.
rolls downhill. And then what happens is the last comment I'll make is their measure of success becomes is it compliant and is it on time, right? And once you
Hmm.
and eventually that becomes the mindset of many. So when I started doing capture, because I came out of delivery in an area where I'm a systems thinker, I was doing a lot of analysis and more. When I was doing capture, it just became second nature to me. So the things I talk about were second nature to me. And I treated that solution architect, I treat all those people as my internal customers to set them up for success. And now when I step back, as we talk more about this proposed role, to be a little bit honest, a lot of capture managers don't have the facilitative skill sets that are necessary. They're just not in their DNA. Not that they can't do what they're supposed to do, gather context of the customer, company, competition, but to be facilitative and to be that Sherpa, I felt that there's another role that I need to step out of what I'm doing and train people to do what I do. And they become a partner of the capture manager, partner of the business developer. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I think because of like the tight deadlines and how complex some of these proposals kind of can be, it's really easy to get lost and have I think you phrased it before about, misalignments of priorities versus expectations, right? And there are so many um demanding expectations and sometimes contrary and conflicting expectations that it's really hard sometimes for BD capture people to um, decide on what takes priority, over things. And we really need to stop demanding these, we got to put pen to paper. We've got to like produce something to equate that to being effective or being productive. Sometimes you can't produce something, right? And it's not a tangible deliverable or things like that, but that doesn't mean that critical thinking and working and relationship building wasn't done. It's just
Right.
done, but it sometimes takes a little while for it to manifest itself.
The thinking is the work.
Yeah.
You know, the thinking is the work. And sometimes you hear a negative phrase. People might call it now paralysis by analysis. And
Hmm.
I've come across, when I do come across those people, those have been the more intellectual lazy ones, and they've never got a successful outcome.
Yeah. Well, I usually think the people who are, have the analysis paralysis tend to think that they think very highly of themselves, and sometimes they
That's
just
right.
like to hear themselves talk. So,
That's right.
um,